Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to Kiner's Community. I am your host, David Kiner, State Representative from the 59th District, representing the towns of Enfield and East Windsor. I am extremely honored tonight to welcome my guest, the Governor of the great state of Connecticut, Dannel P. Malloy. Governor, thank you very much for being my guest this evening.
Great to be with you. I mean, just the fact that you do this is wonderful. It's a wonderful way for you to communicate with your constituents.
It is. I love the show and all the volunteers here. I very much appreciate all their hard work and getting our message out to the community and let them know what we're doing down in Hartford. Before we get started, Governor, with the policy questions, I want my viewers to get to know their governor a little bit more. I know that they see you on TV at storm responses and talking policy, but more the personal side of you. Can you let the viewers know a little bit more about yourself, your family, and maybe some of the things that you like doing when you're not attending meetings or events or at the Capitol?
I like to cook.
Do you?
I like to
Very
cook. I enjoy it. Cooked a big Easter meal for a bunch of my family, and after this show, I'll go home and cook some dinner. I find it very relaxing. I'm married. My wife and I met when we were freshmen in college, and we've been married for over 30 years now. And she's my best friend, always has been, always will be. We have 3 sons, Dannel, Ben, and Sam, and they're all somewhere in their college education, getting their degrees, different places. Pretty straightforward. I like my job. I've been involved in government for a long time. Actually, out of law school, my first job was a prosecutor in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York. I followed that up by going home to Stamford, where I had been raised, practicing law privately. Got involved in politics a little bit like yourself, did some local things, Board of Finance, Board of Ed, mayor for 14 years, year off, governor, got elected governor at a pretty tough time. Had the largest per capita deficit of any of the 50 states in the nation when I took over, and really just trying to right the state. I love to work. I actually, a couple of other things I do. I run just about every day. Started about a year ago. Feel a lot better as a result of making sure I get my physical activity. Just that's some of the background.
Very good. We're going to dive deeper into some of those policy issues in a little bit. But as a follow-up, what did you make for Easter?
I made a lot. We served turkey, and we served ham, and we served lamb, and we served beef, and we had macaroni and cheese, and we had grilled vegetables that I did. I did the lamb on the grill. Peppers, onions, asparagus, all done on the grill.
Wow.
It was a pretty good meal.
I thought we had a good Easter dinner. I'm a little jealous. Governor, you mentioned, and you've been involved for many, many years. You just mentioned all of your elected positions. What specifically got you involved in politics?
Well, it's a series of things, I think. Some of them are directly related, and some of them are indirectly related. The indirect part is I grew up with fairly severe learning disabilities and physical disabilities that I had to work to overcome, dyslexic and other processing disorders. I think the skill set, compensatory skill set that I developed to get through life with those difficulties actually, played well into politics. Communications, oral communication skills, expressions of leadership were all things that were fostered to help me get around my learning disabilities. And they're pretty good for a trial lawyer. They're actually pretty good for politics as well. I also was raised in a family that was politically involved, and so that became natural and was supported at home. And then ultimately I find it rewarding. I mean, I decided to devote a good portion of my adult life to trying to make this world a better place for my having lived in it, which is something my mother told me just about every day we spoke for 29 years.
Well, Governor, I think that politics can and is an honorable profession. So I know some people look up to you for doing that, but people with learning disabilities, I know, do look up to you for what you've overcome. So congratulations on that, and thank you for your service. I think anybody who's watching this show probably watches the news often and can see that you and Lieutenant Governor Nancy Wyman seem to have a very close relationship and appear to work together really well. Do you see this as a new era for lieutenant governors in the state of Connecticut, where they really have a true partnership role with the governor. I don't think we've seen that too much.
Yeah,
in the past.
I was a downstate, Fairfield County government guy, so I can't tell you that I have a expert knowledge of Hartford and all things Hartford and gubernatorial. But what I can tell you is that Nancy and I have a partnership. I wanted her to run with me as lieutenant governor. She took a gigantic chance. I was down 22 points in the polls the day that she agreed to run with me, and that was for a primary. I was down 22 points. She took a chance on me. I took no chance on her, right, other than wanting her. We are a team. There are things that I've asked her to play the lead role on, the implementation of healthcare reform being the biggest of those particular assignments, and that's a massive issue in the state of Connecticut. It represents a large portion of our budget. But we talk all the time. We have meetings constantly. We appear together. We appear separately, but we're always working together.
All right, and Nancy's no stranger to the town of Enfield and East Windsor. She's always here at parades and whenever
in her high-heeled shoes.
In her high heels, that's right, always marching. And actually, to the point you just made, my father served with Nancy in the State House way back when, and he's been quoted as telling me that that's one of the smartest moves you've ever made, is picking Nancy as your lieutenant governor.
That was some of the best begging I ever did.
Oh, I'm sure. Governor, on to some more serious questions, and probably our last personal question that will kind of transition us into some more policy questions. Governor, how has Newtown affected your life, both professionally and personally, in the decisions that you have to make as governor?
Well, I think it had a profound impact. I mean, I was there on the 14th of December, a few hours after the shooting, and didn't leave, I think, till about 10 o'clock that night. And then I was back for days and days on end after that, including 21 funerals and numerous other wakes. And just today, before I came over here, I was meeting with a parents group of folks who had lost their children or their spouse on that day. And it has occupied a lot of my thought, a lot of my time, and a lot of my energy on this issue of what do we do on mental health, what do we do on gun safety, what do we do on some of these big issues. It's constantly with me, and I suspect will be constantly with me. Actually, I wear a bracelet for everyone, and then I have another bracelet that was one of the funerals that I attended shortly after the event, and I don't think that that's ever going to leave me.
All right, Governor, your sincerity and compassion shines through, not only now, but I watched you for days and days, well, that day and days after the event. Governor, as a response to Sandy Hook, the town of Enfield's Board of Education and Town Council recently approved $650,000 a year to be spent on having armed guards in all of our public schools. Enfield residents seem to be very divided on this one issue, this one topic. What are your thoughts about having armed guards in our public schools?
Well, David, that is a local issue, and ultimately local leaders have to make that decision. I think that there are things that the state should mandate. Obviously, entrances to schools need to be locked. They need to be made harder. You shouldn't be able to shoot your way into a school. There are those kinds of things that we should be mandating, but I am absolutely against the state mandating that there be armed guards there or that there not be. I think it has to be a local question. Most questions having to do with education are just that. I would tell you $660,000 is a lot of money.
It is.
We have school systems that have guards. We have school systems that have armed guards. We have school systems that have SRO officers. We have school systems that don't have any of that. So I think we're going to concentrate on making sure that entrances and exits and security systems are intact, and leave to local governments how they want to spend the money that they raise. What I would say is it would be a terrible outcome of what happened on Sandy Hook if that $660,000 comes out of the classroom and isn't spent on education improvement. We spent a lot of time in the legislature last year to pass a school reform package. If these are additional dollars that the community has decided to spend collectively, that's fine. It would be terrible as a legacy to be pulling money out of classrooms.
I agree with you there. Thank you for that answer. And I mentioned that the town is divided, and I think earlier, before this show started taping, I let you know both my sisters are teachers, both my parents are retired public school teachers. My family is even divided on that issue. And we're going to continue on a little bit later in the show with this issue when I read to you some viewer-submitted questions. However, let's move on to some more policy questions now. This year, the legislature will be approving and passing a state budget. We've gotten your proposed budget and recommendations. What are 2 or 3 of your priorities that you would really like to see passed in this budget?
That brings me back to education right after that. I mean, we haven't seen as robust growth on a national economy or a state economy as any of us would have liked to have seen, which means that this is a budget that's not going to raise taxes and therefore not going to have a lot more money to spend. And so what I'm saying is, okay, let's decide what our priorities are. And in my opinion, education has got to be our biggest priority, whether it's in an urban environment or a non-urban environment. We have too many systems that are failing too many of the children in our school systems. We've got to find better ways to provide a higher level of education. We used to say it's good enough to share opportunities, but really what we're now in is we have to become a state that makes sure that we're having higher achievement levels reached. Otherwise, we're not going to be competitive with 49 other states in the rest of the world when it comes to job creation. That's something that we have failed at for 22, 23 years. Although since I became governor, we've created 22,000 private sector jobs. That's still only a small portion of the totality of the jobs that the prior governor saw lost when she was governor during the Great Recession.
Sure.
So jobs and education are my two biggest priorities. Now, I understand other people have priorities, and that's why all of you in the legislature have all of the work that you've got to do. But my priorities are education and job creation. And then ultimately what we have to do is build a state that's going to be better to our citizens. In this budget, I'm calling for reinstating the tax deductibility with respect to certain types of clothing. Initially back to $25 exemption, eventually back to the original $50 exemption. Let's give some relief to middle-income taxpayers.
Sure. I thank you for that. As a legislator, we don't make that much money, so I'd appreciate that. And I share your priorities there on a state level, and it goes down to my district. But as a legislator from Enfield and East Windsor, one of our top priorities, especially for Enfield, is seeing that the Springfield to Hartford to New Haven rail line really come to fruition. Can you let the viewers know that you are committed to this project? And I don't know if you have any timetables in mind, but when we might be able to expect construction to begin on the Enfield Transit Center, and when maybe we can actually expect to see buses and or trains stopping in Enfield.
Well, I am absolutely committed to it, so much so that our state is actually putting in a higher percentage of our own dollars to match federal dollars than just about any other state in the nation when it comes to reestablishment of rail connections. This is very important for the entire New Haven to Springfield, eventually to Montreal. Sure. System. Just as Massachusetts is going to reinvigorate travel between Boston and Springfield, that gives us a whole new opportunity to have people commute through eastern parts of Massachusetts to Connecticut, taking a different route. We're committed. We're moving this thing forward. We have bid packages going. We have work underway in some places. I think realistically, the build-out of the New Haven to Hartford comes first and foremost. That's where we know the largest percentage of commutation could be reestablished. But I am equally committed to the build-out to Springfield and beyond.
Right,
I talk to the Governor Dannel Patrick about this on a regular basis. We're both working pretty hard to get this done.
Well, I appreciate that answer. Being from North Central Connecticut, I'm glad to hear that second tier is still a priority of yours.
Oh, it absolutely
Hartford
is. You know, I know that there's some folks who want to have additional discussions. Well, where are stations, and will it all be double tracked? And you know, initially, I don't think it will all be double tracked. Eventually, it's entirely possible that will be an additional expense at some point undertaken. But what we've got to do is increase commutation, regular folks using it to get back and forth to work. But also, I think Amtrak has a much bigger future in Connecticut and Massachusetts if we can improve this line. If we make travel faster, more people will use it.
Well, Governor, I'm glad to hear you say that, and I want you to know that Enfield is totally committed to having a station in town. We actually I invited your Commissioner of DOT, Commissioner Redeker, to come to Enfield, and he did. So he's well aware of our plans and where we are in Enfield. So again, thank you for that answer. Governor, another issue of concern is that COMP recently announced that they would like their customers to help make up a $464 million debt that they incurred during several major storms over the past few years, which I know you're very well aware
Yes,
of.
I am.
During these difficult economic times, do you think that this is a job of the customer? Is there anything that you see that the state can do to help stave off some of this increased economic burden?
Well, we've done some things already as part of a package where the utility, Northeast Utility specifically, came forward and paid folks who were out of power for extended periods of time. We actually dispersed that money to people who made application. As part of that agreement, and that was tens of millions of dollars, as part of that agreement, they also agreed to forego a portion, I think it's about 60 or 70 million, I'm sorry I don't have the exact number in my memory, but 60 or 70 million dollars of possible reimbursable expenses that they agreed that they will not be reimbursed for. So now they've come forward with this, I guess it's about $413 million looking to be reimbursed. That needs to be gone over every line, every I, every T, everything.
Sure.
And clearly they should not receive compensation for anything that they're not entitled to. Under our law in Connecticut, they are undoubtedly going to be entitled to recover some portion of that money. But then how that's structured and how long a period of time it's paid out and what the impact would be for monthly bills is very important. For instance, right now, if the entire amount was approved, for the average homeowner, that would be an additional $3 per month. And that would go on until the entire bill is paid. Now that's bad, but it's not the end of the world. But my hunch is it's going to come down even more. And even if we have to then spread it out over a longer period of time, that's one possibility as well. But I think they're not going to get 413. They're going to get something less than that. I know the Attorney General is going to be involved. Our Consumer Commissioner, as well as PURA, as well as our Department of Energy. Everyone's going to be involved in looking this thing and get it down as low as we possibly can.
I'm sure the viewers will be happy to hear that. As a follow-up, are you satisfied with COMP's most recent response to our most recent storm? I know you weren't back.
Yeah, October, the first couple of times I was not too happy. We've had 5 natural disaster declarations in the last couple of years. And clearly, the first several times, the utilities were caught flat-footed, underprepared, under-drilled, didn't have the stuff nearby needed to get the system up and running in a short period of time. Thanks to your work and others, we got a bill passed. We hold them responsible. Anytime that 10% or more of the customers of any utility lose that utility, there is a mandated review process. And they can be fined if their recovery is not consistent with our established standards. And when I say fine, that's when you fine them, they can't go to their ratepayers and say, we want you to pay it. It
Right.
comes out of their actual profits. As a result, we have their attention. And they did a substantially better job, in my opinion, in Superstorm Sandy than they did in any of the prior events. We also, and this is interesting, last summer, we did a 4-day exercise, and a lot of small towns complain, you can't do this, it's overtime, it's all that. Well, you know what, that's what we need to do, and because we had that drill well before Superstorm Sandy, we were in much better shape and much better prepared and much more responsive than we would otherwise have been. Now, if you're out of power for a long period of time, you're not going to be happy.
Right.
But we are better at this. The utility is better at this than they have ever been before.
Oh, good. And Governor, I would just say thank you very much for your leadership. I know it's tough a couple of years for you coming in to have to deal with those storms, but I know the viewers appreciate your leadership and your constant communication with them, with all those press conferences that you had. And
you have to do it. You have to keep people informed.
Governor, I do want to. We have a few minutes left. I do want to get to some viewer submitted questions, but before I do, I just want to move on to some general political questions. As somebody who's been involved with politics for many years, what do you attribute this lack of stability in politics these days? I would say more so in Washington than in Hartford.
Yeah, well, I think Washington's become this very divided community, and our partisan politics have taken over. I think the rise of the Tea Party, particularly on the Republican side, has meant that everyone's afraid of a primary,
right.
and we have a party where moderates or partial extremists are always afraid of somebody who's going to be even more extreme than they are. So that's created a dynamic in Washington, the Republican Party, that I think has been corrosive for our nation. And I don't see it changing at any time in the short run. I mean, we just finished a presidential election, re-elected the president with pretty big numbers, and yet we're back to the same behaviors.
Sure, and to that, I mean, we have Citizens United, that case, that Supreme Court case. Do you see Citizens United being defeated anytime soon? And if not, which I don't think it's going to be, how do you think this will affect gubernatorial races here in Connecticut in the future?
Well, Citizens United is the case where the Supreme Court decided that it made it much more difficult to limit expenditures by independent parties, including corporations, including foreign corporations. I mean, I think any jurist who participated in that decision, when they're written about in the future, it will be marked as one of the worst decisions ever rendered in the United States. And I think it'll be an embarrassment to all of them. With respect to the implications in state elections, I think we saw in the last November cycle a fair amount of independent expenditures being made in state house and state senate races, most of that going after Democrats. I think that's a certain reality that we have to prepare for. But, I think that there'll be Democrats who get more organized and go after Republicans. I think this is going to be a two-way street.
Right. And we have some of the strongest campaign finance laws in the country here, and I think it's a shame all that outside money comes in.
Listen, I ran for governor inside that system, inside a state-funded system. I ran in a primary against somebody who went outside the system. I ran in a general election against somebody who went outside the system, and we still won. But I hope that whoever runs for governor on either side is going to stick to the state-controlled expenditures. We would all be better for it.
That's true. We can look to our own our U.S. Senate race last time. So money doesn't always win elections.
No,
it does a lot of the times, though. Governor, we have, I'm sure you're familiar with the patch online.
Yeah.
The local newspapers. I had some viewers submit questions, and we have about 4 minutes left, so we can kind of run through these. This will be the lightest question that you get tonight right here. This comes from Peter. What is it like living in the governor's residence?
Oh, it's pretty neat. First of all, I mean, I can't imagine if I had to commute back and forth to Stamford every day.
Right.
It would make the job very difficult. For instance, in those horrific storms. It's a great place. We're trying to have as many people come to see it as possible. We've quadrupled the number of events that the public holds at the house. We're also going to have some art displayed on the property, so it's an exciting place.
Very good. I've been to a few of the events recently. Last year we went to one for homelessness, and so I do appreciate you opening up your home. We're trying to fly through these now. James wants to know, how are you going to balance next year's budget without raising taxes Or are we the next California?
No, we're not the next California, although, I'm not sure everything that's implied about being the next California. Having gone through this winter, I could have used a little more sun. But I'll say this, that no, we don't want to raise taxes. We had to do that. When I got elected, we had the largest per capita deficit. That is the largest deficit per person in the United States. It was 17%. It was too big to cut our way out of it. Too big to tax our way out of it. We had to do that, plus change our relationship with our employees. We need to be done with that. We need to live within our means. We need to set priorities, and as far as I'm concerned, it's education and jobs.
Very good. In 1 minute or less, Eric says, this deeper, maybe you can have a little bit more than a minute.
Right.
Eric says, since the Sandy Hook shootings, the governor seems hell-bent on restricting lawful citizens' access to firearms and ammunition. Since criminals, by definition, don't follow laws, how will this increase our safety if we have less ability to defend ourselves? What will be done to actually increase safety and reduce the chance of future attacks?
Well, Connecticut has never been safer than it is right now. Crime is down, has continued to fall rapidly each month that I've been governor. We're going to continue to do that work. We have the lowest recidivism, meaning people going back to jail within a year or 2 years than we've had in a very long time. So we're going to continue to do those things. And we have no desire to restrict proper ownership by citizens who should have a gun. We do have a disagreement, I think, with some folks about what that gun should be. I don't believe it should be an assault weapon. I don't believe you should be able to walk into a school in this state with a magazine of 30 shots and go off actually 154 shots in 5 minutes or less, killing 20 babies and 6 adults. And so I'm going to do everything in my power to restrict assault weapons in our state, as well as large magazines. But I will also fight equally hard to make sure that the Second Amendment rights of our citizens are protected.
Very good. I don't have time to read this entire question, but Conchetta would like to know about funding for mental health.
Yeah, we're going to continue to be a leader in mental health funding. We have 45,000 people insured for mental health coverage in our state that wouldn't be insured in any other state under the LEA programs, costing us a lot of money. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to do other things in legislation to make sure that people have the opportunity to get mental health treatment, drug and alcohol treatment. We want to expand those opportunities, and healthcare reform is going to be a big part of that.
Very good. To the viewers who did submit questions I did not get to, I apologize. We did run out of time. But Governor, before we do leave, just a few more questions. First, who will win the NCAA tournament?
You know, it's a tough one. I'm an old Big East guy, so Syracuse, you got to pull for, particularly after what happened to one of their key players, Louisville. I'm going to stick with Louisville.
You're going to go with Louisville?
Yeah.
Okay, and we should note that this taping is occurring on Monday, April 1st, so right. It'll air all through April, so there will be a champion, and hopefully, well, we'll see if you're right.
All right.
More importantly, who will win the women's NCAA tournament?
You know, Baylor went down.
They did.
That's a great opportunity for UConn to win, because I think Baylor is a tough team. I saw the Baylor game here in Hartford. We got to get by tonight. We got to face down Notre Dame. Yeah, but I think we can win this thing.
Let's go Huskies.
Yeah,
I agree with you there.
I've been to a bunch of those games. Very exciting.
Last question, and I know there's some legalities here, you can't say too much, but what are you planning to do next November? Any big plans?
And listen, I like this job very much. I'm doing the best I can. I know that there are people who don't like me and want me to do other things, but I wouldn't be shocked to be around a little bit longer.
Very good. Well, Governor, if you ever want to come on the show again and make any announcement, we'd be happy to have you. You're always invited. Governor Dannel Malloy, thank you very much for being my guest on Kindness Community. Very much appreciate it.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.